Now to strong words from a Chelsea defender Thiago Silva, who has warned the club that they will repeat the mistakes of this season unless they stop and put a strategy in place. Well, Silva spoke to reporters after last night's Champions League exit to Real Madrid. Silva said, "I think the first step has been made, an incorrect step, but it has been made. We can't be blaming managers if we don't take responsibility. We had to increase the size of the changing room because it didn't fit the size of the squad. A positive point is that there are amazing players within the squad, but on the other hand, there is always players that are going to be unhappy. There is always going to be someone upset because not everyone can play. The manager can only pick 11 from 30 or something. That's tough. Some can't make the squad. We signed 8 in January. We need to stop and put a strategy in place. Otherwise, next season, we could make the same mistakes." OK, let's get more on those comments from Silva. We can see at the Evening Standard journalist Nizar Kinsella, who's been following Chelsea for the last 7 years. Thank you, Nizar. I mean, you've obviously written about Silva's comments. Were you surprised he was so open about his criticism about the club?
Yeah, I was very surprised. He's the first player really to come out and say something along these lines. We've kind of heard a lot of this kind of stuff off the record. We've seen reports similar to sort of his comments, but to actually see a player come out and spell it out, talking about the 32-man squad that Chelsea have, the dressing room isn't big enough. Many players are unhappy because they're being left out every single week. They can't build cohesion because of the squad size, and that's kind of affecting performances. To see a player sort of say it, spell it out, and speak passionately like that, I think it has to be lauded. And I think that, yeah, it's a real concern. And Chelsea almost feel like maybe they've been set up to fail by sort of having this sort of group of oversized squad of players.
Yeah, on that, I mean, it's not just players being left out of the squad. Silva talked about players being left out of the dressing room because they didn't fit. Has the overinflated squad actually now had a negative impact on their season?
Oh, massively so, yeah. I think that anyone in football really would say if you have a squad size over 25 players, it's way too big. Chelsea also have a huge academy, really strong academy underneath, and those players aren't anywhere near getting a look in. But yeah, you've got players like João Felix left on the bench, Raheem Sterling, Mikhailo Mudryk as well. These are massive players just being left on the bench week to week. And then you have many more who've been signed, like Noni Madueke. Remember him, he was signed in January. He's not even in the matchday squad. Aubameyang can't even be registered for the Champions League. He was only signed in September. So that you've got this kind of huge issue here, almost unmanageable. And I think Graham Potter probably found it when he was managing Chelsea. And now, at the same time, it's kind of happened to Frank Lampard, who's not won a game. In fact, he's lost every game since he's been appointed as caretaker manager.
On that, he's become the first Chelsea manager to lose his opening 4 games, hasn't he? Do you think it's unfair to blame him? He was never going to come in and wave a magic wand, was he?
Yeah. I mean, those are almost his words that he uses. But yeah, I think that's really, it would be hard to blame him. It almost feels like an unmanageable situation. I didn't expect too much from him. I think that he was quite well qualified to come in because he knew the club and he didn't have a long time to get to know the squad, to try and implement tactics. So that was kind of useful in the situation. His legendary status as well sort of commands respect, and everyone does respect him. But to kind of expect him to turn this group of strangers, really, I see them, into a real team, it hasn't happened. And actually, last night they played pretty well. Lampard got his tactics spot on, but it's all too little too late. I mean, even changing a manager when they did, they probably waited too long. If you're going to change Potter, do it earlier. Or if you're going to make a change, then wait until the end of the season and appoint a maybe more experienced manager who you prefer long term. So I think that it's just another decision, really, that maybe the owners have got wrong. And I think that that's where a lot of the anger's lying today, and that's where Thiago Silva's comments are aimed at, really.
I mean, on that then, I mean, the Chelsea owners, we know, we're not going to be rushed into making a permanent manager. We believe that Lampard's going to be there to the end of the season. But does it make sense to bring someone in now and give the new man a bit of time actually to get to know his squad before next season when they all disappear on holiday?
Yeah, maybe. I think that you almost feel like they just need to keep making changes until something works and something sticks. It doesn't feel like wins are coming that freely. In the Premier League, they're performing even worse than the Champions League. So you really do worry and we wonder as well where the next point's coming from. So it could be that a new manager could come in and do that, but I just don't think they'll sort of change their plan. I mean, there's been too many U-turns, too many changes. I think you may as well wait until the end of the season now, give Frank Lampard his time in the spotlight, and try and get him to work with these group of players, try and get them to prove themselves. We might get an announcement maybe on a new manager, but they don't come in until pre-season. And I think that that's the most likely scenario. We've got Julian Nagelsmann, who many outsiders believe is a front runner, although the club expects it's an open race with people like Maurizio Pochettino, and just recently we've found out Luis Enrique kind of is the less favoured option, but sort of still in the race now. So we've got that kind of situation going on where people are still being interviewed, decisions are still being made, but and I think that Lampard will likely sort of steady the ship and see it out, even though it's not gone too well for him so far.
Do you expect the squad to be cut this summer in terms of having too many players and actually looking at their wage bills as well, because they're not going to have Champions League football?
Yeah, they have to cut the squad. It's not even debatable, I think, at this stage. It's too big. It's simple mathematics. You're allowed to register 25 players for a Champions League. That's about the right number of players you want anyway in a squad, just in terms of managing them. So they're not in Europe next season, almost certainly. I think it's very unlikely they even get in Europa League or Conference League through their Premier League performances. So they need to cut down that squad desperately, and it's too big. I mean, it's 32 players. And it felt too big with European football and being played this season. If there's none, it'll feel even bigger. So they have to cut it down by at least 7 or 8 players, and then they've also got to sell loanees. Don't forget Chelsea own Romelu Lukaku, who's on £325,000 a week. So they need to sell him. They need to sell Hudson-Odoi. Maybe they've got a lot of other sort of loanees out there, and a lot of academy players as well will want their chance in a first team, and maybe Chelsea can't give it because they've got too many players. So I expect maybe a dozen or more players being sold this summer, and maybe that can help the financial situation of missing out on Europe. Now there's the problem: can you sell the ones you want? And that's going to be a big question. And on wages, I think that automatically the wages do reduce at Chelsea if they don't qualify for the Champions League. So a lot of the players they've got now can expect a pay cut next season, and that's just a result of maybe the mismanagement and their own poor performances as well.
How do you think this then changes the situation of players coming to Chelsea? Because they clearly need a striker. Who do you think they'll be looking to sign? I know we've just discussed getting rid of players, but this is something that seems quite obvious. But who's going to come?
Yeah, well, they can't add too many because there's no room. But I think that we all see that Chelsea need a striker. Looking at that performance yesterday, the amount of chances wasted. Real Madrid took theirs. Chelsea didn't. Chelsea are out of the Champions League because, partly of that reason. But it's been a problem all season. They've even signed, many wingers, many number 10s, but none of them are the finishers. You look at Man City and Haaland, that would have been the perfect player for Chelsea. But yeah, they'll be looking at that. I think they might look at a goalkeeper as well, just to add into their group, and maybe a central midfielder. But Victor Osimhen's a name that I've heard. He won't be the only one, and it's going to be maybe even hard to attract a player like that from Napoli, who's winning the league at a stable club, scoring loads of goals. It might be a bit, it might not feel like it's worth joining Chelsea if you're not in Europe. So, and if you're competing for those players against Manchester United, who are in the Champions League probably, or a Man City or Liverpool, you might lose. So, even with all Chelsea's money. So I think that's sort of the concern now is, do Chelsea look too unstable for the top players to want to join them? And I'd argue probably yes.
Right, Nizar, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me.